Hello, hello, welcome to the replay. If you want to talk about how to choose an editor for your writing, you're in the right place. And did you know you can give hearts too? If there's something that really resonates with you while you're on the replay, tap the screen and it sends hearts just like if you were live in the room with us. So, welcome. Let me get myself set up here. Hey Miguel, welcome as we're joining in. So yes, today we're talking about how to choose an editor. I feel like a lot of people, a lot of people do this kind of haphazardly. Like they write something and then after they've written it, they're like, oh, I need an editor. Let me hop online and find one. And you may or may not be choosing someone who's going to help make your work better. So I wanted to give you some tips on how to approach this. Thanks for the hearts, Miguel. How to approach this in a really smart and strategic way so that you find an editor who is good for your writing and who you can stick with for a long time, who helps you develop your voice and lean into the life of an author that you want to become. So that's kind of our topic for today. If you guys are live on the web, I feel like there's always a lot of web watchers. It's way more fun to be in the room on Periscope. So get the app and follow at Morgan G. Mac. And if you want to get the scope notes, you know where they are. I take notes for you guys. I put them on paperravenbooks.com/Periscope, and you can catch notes, replays, transcripts. And thanks for sharing, Miguel. If you scope and write, use the hashtag Periscope Writer so we can find you and support you. And, who am I? I'm Morgan Giss McDonald. I'm a writing coach, editor, and author. And I help people write books. I take you from a vague idea to first draft to manuscript, chapter by chapter, and help you write the book that you have been wanting to write. And part of that process is finding an editor. Well, not when you're working with me, I'm your editor. But if you're not working with me, you're still going to need an editor. And how do you do that? First, I would like to point out there are a couple of different types of editing, and you need to think about what your work really needs. At the highest level, there's writing coaching, which is someone who takes you through the beginning of a manuscript. So catches you at vague idea and helps you write the whole thing. Then there is developmental editing. After you've written a first draft, a developmental editor will come in. Hey, Jessica, no problem. You know where to catch the notes. Okay, so a developmental editor will come in and edit your first draft and tell you where there are points where you're like repetitive, or you need to be more clear, or there's a gap here, or this paragraph should actually be up here in this other chapter. Like they'll move things around in the structure of the book. And then below that, there's copy editing, which is like sentence level stuff. So they're going to go in and change all the different parts of your sentences, reword things. It's sentence by sentence editing. And then proofreading is the lowest level. I mean, not that proofreading isn't important, it's vital. But it's the most like detailed, zoomed in, and it's catching all of those little like subject to verb agreements and typos and misspellings and stuff. So those are the different levels. And so when you're thinking about hiring an editor, you really need to get clear on what you need. So if you already have a first draft, you're not going to need writing coaching. You're going to need an editor. I recommend that you do all three levels of editing. I recommend that you do developmental editing and copy editing and proofreading. And honestly, it's better if you have at least 2 editors. When I work with authors, I work with a team. So I do the writing coaching and developmental. My team does copy editing and proofreading. So everything that we edit gets 2 different sets of eyes, because I think that's really important. But you still need a primary relationship. I suggest you develop a primary relationship with an editor who does developmental and copy editing. Most editors will do both because we feel like most editors do copy editing. It's sort of like the sentence level stuff. We're all generally pretty good at that. Some people like the higher up, broader stuff like developmental. Some people prefer the lower level proofreading. So find an editor who does developmental and copy editing and develop a relationship with that person. Well, how do you know if you're going to like that person? Hopefully they have a website. I would really encourage you to look for someone who has a website, and some sort of social media presence so that you can get to know their tone. I know a lot of people go onto Upwork.com, which is where you can get freelance people, and that's fine, but make sure the person has actually like filled out their About Me area, written some paragraphs so you can tell what they sound like, how the person sounds, how the person talks. And the reason that I want you to look for a website or social media or at least a few paragraphs that the editor has written, because I want you to tune into the editor's voice. Because here's the thing. You want your editor to be someone that you would enjoy sitting down with and talking with, someone who you vibe well with, that you get along with, who you find personable. Because an editor's voice is going to show up in your writing. So you've got this, let's do an example here. You've got a first draft. It's done, and you want to hand it over to a copy editor. You're like, I like this structure, kind of how it is, and I really just want copy editing. I want you to just go in and make sure the sentences sound good. Okay, so you find this, you go in search of a copy editor, and the copy editor there are different types of people who go into editing. Okay, so there are people who are really good, hey Keisha, there are people who are really good at English and making A's in English classes and writing papers that English professors really like. And so when they graduate and they aren't sure quite what they want to do, they're like, I'll be an editor. Okay, fine, that's good. But they don't really push themselves to excel and figure out editing as a craft. And so they remain at the level of English class. And their main purpose is to make sure that everything is grammatically correct and that there are no typos and that you sound proper. Okay, so if you can imagine taking your precious first draft and handing it to someone whose main history is doing really well in English class, they're gonna take your first draft and they're going to rewrite stuff and make it sound like a really good English class paper. But that's not what you want. That type of English class writing is not compelling, is not going to sell, is not going to connect with your reader and audience. Yeah, it'll be grammatically correct. Jessica's like, oh great. It'll be grammatically correct, and an English professor would give it an A+, but you're not selling to English professors. You're selling to real people in the marketplace. Okay, so yeah, when I edit stuff, we go for grammar. Everything's going to be correct, but I'm okay with bending the rules a little bit if I feel like the voice is going to come out. You know, like if we start a sentence with but, that's okay, because it's all about how the overall tone and voice sounds. So if you are hiring a copy editor whose main sort of, trophy in life is that they did really well as an English major, like, just be careful. That's okay. Yes, starting a sentence with but is totally okay. If it serves a purpose, to break up a sentence and really emphasize the second sentence. So break rules with a purpose is totally fine. So when you go to look at someone's profile on Upwork or wherever you're looking for an editor, if they emphasize things like, I was an English major, or their grade point average, or that they look for grammar errors and subject-verb agreement and, capitalization, if they emphasize that those basic, English grammar-y things are their focus, then that's what's going to be their focus when they're going at it on your first draft. So I would be really cautious. Instead, what you want to look for is an editor who understands that the writing should be conversational. Miguel says, yeah, sometimes a character has broken English, so they have to work with that. Exactly. And so you can imagine that an editor whose primary, trumpet trophy in life is doing well in English class, is not going to know what to do with a broken accent. They're just not going to be helpful. So you want to look for an editor who has a little bit broader perspective and understands that writing is about connecting with a reader, it's about selling, and it's about marketing, and it's about communicating your message in a really powerful, compelling way. That is the focus. Jessica says, imagine what it was like to edit Harry Potter. Yeah, it's true. It's true. That would be so difficult. I'm sure Rowling has some pretty good editors, especially later on in the series. You can actually see a huge change in her style between book 1 and book 7. It's so you know her editing crew changed as well. But when you're reading either the website or the about on the Upwork.com, the editor should convey some sort of understanding that the writing is supposed to be compelling or marketable or transformative, like a higher purpose for the writing. If the website or the about page on Upwork.com is all about grammar and subject-verb agreement, then like skip next. Okay, does that kind of make sense? I want to give you some stuff that's actionable so that when you're out there looking, you know what to look for. So how they talk about how they present their own services is really important. In addition to the fact that you want them to be cool and would want to hang out with them because their voice is going to show up in your writing. So as editors, we have a little phrase that we use. We say that we try to do no harm to the writing, and Keisha will appreciate that. She's a physician, but editors have a similar philosophy. We try to do no harm to your writing. But we're humans, and we have our own voice, we have our own style, and so we're in there fixing up sentences. There are going to be times where, for instance, I'm going to start sentences with but. That's my style, that's my voice. And Miguel says, what to do if there's some Spanish or some other language in the story? Get 2 separate editors. Get one for English and get one for Spanish. There are a lot of bilingual editors, so you might think about that as well. That way it could be one person. But then when you get to proofreading, I don't know. Find one editor. This would be ideal. This is the ideal scenario. Find one editor who is bilingual, who does copy editing, and get that person to edit it and ask them for their recommendation for a proofreader. You might need 2 proofreaders. I don't know the answer to that. But find one person who you think you trust, who's bilingual and knows editing and whose voice you like. Because even though we say that we're going to do no harm, we're going to change sentences up in a way that maybe is a bit more formal style or a bit more conversational style, is a bit more by the rules, is a bit more bends the rules. And so it's just gonna happen that occasionally there are gonna be blips here and there where we're gonna change things and it's gonna be according to how we think it should sound, which is affected by our own voice. It's just, we're human. So take that into account. If your editor sounds like a robot when you are emailing back and forth, that's a problem. Hire someone else. The best way to know your editor's voice is to get on the phone with them if you can. Miguel says sounds good. Yeah, get on the phone with them, and editors, if they can talk about their craft on the phone in a way that you're like, this person knows what they're talking about, and they're fun to talk to, double win. That is the ideal combination. So that's what I have for you guys. Oh, and then if you really want to make sure, at the end of the day, who wins in disputes? This is Jessica. The author always wins. In my book, I think it's ultimately the author's book, the author's work, and so it should be your whatever you want. You know, I mean, I'll make suggestions. Heck, when I'm editing, I'm so in the zone, in the words, that I literally just like make changes. It's in track changes, so you can see everything that's been changed. But then it's up to the author to go back and revert that. So if they didn't like something, they kind of have to change it back themselves. But I've had very few people tell me they didn't like what I changed about their writing. So I don't know. Ultimately, I think the author wins. But as the author, you got to be really careful and think about whether it's your pride that is wanting to win this argument, or whether it really is you have a good reason for wanting to win the argument. If you have an editor who's not willing to bend on something, that is actually a bad sign. If your editor's like, no, this is the way it is, that person's not flexible enough to be writing. Jessica says, I think I've been thinking too much on editing as I go. Yes, you should not be editing as you go. You should do 0 editing as you go. You should, if Ron Estrada were here, he would back me up. fast draft. The first draft is a fast draft. Exactly. Just write and edit later. Everyone knows this. Just do it. Just do it. That's why I like working against a timer, because it keeps me focused, and I'm less likely to go back and try to edit as I write if I'm working with the timer. So that's what I do. There's one more thing. Oh, if you want to make sort of doubly sure that you want to work with this person before you give them, like, say, a whole book, give them 3 blog posts and let them do 3 blog posts and see how they do with those. Jessica says that's what I have to do in my current compliance job, so it's a habit. Slowing me down. Oh, yeah, I could see how that would be a bad habit. But just keep trying to implement. Just remind yourself when you're sitting down to write, just like reframe, I'm not in my job. I'm writing for fun. Like, I'm writing for this book. Changing your habits and mindset, exactly. And just like remind yourself, bring yourself, like, set yourself in a different environment, like light a candle, get a glass of wine, like make it however you need to make it in order for it to feel good and creative and flowing and not like your job. But if you want to test out an editor, a really good test is to get 3 blog posts. 1 is not enough, and anything longer than 3 blog posts is maybe you'll end up paying too much, to be perfectly honest. So I think 3 blog posts is about 1,500, 2,000 words is a really good test. So that way you get to see how they would help you with introductions and conclusions, which are very tricky. If they help you move things around and add other suggestions, those are good signs. If they just go into all 3 blog posts and fix like subject-verb agreement and capitalization, that's not helpful. So 3 blog posts is sort of my standard test for someone. If you're not blogging, I would ask why. But if you're not blogging and you want some other test, what is another good test? If you have anything that's close to like 2,000 words, that's just about right. Something that's finished. Some people will say give them a chapter. A chapter is only moderately helpful because they don't get to edit like the beginning and the end. There's a lot of unanswered questions because it's chapter 1. You haven't got to the rest of the book. Warshcock. I'm not sure I know what that means, Jessica. What's Warshcock? I'm going to have to Google that. But, so I don't know that giving them like chapter 1 to edit is really that helpful. I like to give them something, and I hire editors, so I actually go through this process quite a lot. Oh, ink blot psych test. Ooh, that would be interesting. I don't know how I would do against an ink blot psych test. I don't know if I want to take that test. But when I hire new editors and because I start relationships with them and I have them edit a lot of stuff before I even bring them onto my team, but I always give them stuff that has a beginning and an end so that I can see how they're thinking through the whole process of the piece. So that's my recommendation for you guys. Do you have any other questions about finding an editor? Upwork.com is really pretty good. You just have to be discerning. And if someone is editing for $5 an hour, I would say try someone who values their own work a little bit more. Because then if they value their own work, they'll value your work as well. It's kind of a reciprocal thing. So you want someone who's really on board and is going to help you in your writing, and it's not $5 an hour. That's all I would have to say about that. There are lots of fantastic overseas editors and freelancers in general. You just need to kind of go through this process and make sure that you're going to work with them really well. Any other questions? Thank you guys for hanging out. It's been fun, as always, and I will see you guys tomorrow. I don't remember what we're talking about tomorrow, but oh, you're welcome, Jessica. Oh, we're going to be talking about when you get feedback from your editor, how do you handle that? How do you process it? And how do you make revisions? So that will be fun.